This episode of It's Your Call is one of a series dedicated to facing the mortgage crisis in Southern California, brought to you with the support of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Good evening, I'm your host, Roger Bowman. Tonight, along with foreclosure prevention, we'll keep you up to date with two of the prevalent scams that are going around. Our guests this evening are John Maurer, foreclosure specialist from Springboard, a local nonprofit, and Chris Sorensen, founder of USA Help. We invite you to call with your questions of tonight's guests. The toll-free number is 866-367-5827. John, it's your first time on the show. Thank you for being here. You're with Springboard, and it's not Springboard's first time for being on the show.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about Springboard.
Sure. We're a nonprofit, HUD-approved counseling agency, and we've been in business since 1974, serving the Inland Empire for the past 30 years. And I'd say we're pretty well known here and got our name branded here in the area. And we help homeowners, specifically at least in my department, help people navigate through foreclosure and understand what options they have.
So I understand Springboard does foreclosure avoidance counseling, and you also do credit counseling to make sure
correct.
People can afford whatever lifestyle they need to ultimately create for themselves.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Now, one of the things unique about Springboard, there's lots of HUD certified counselors, but Springboard is one of a select number that answer the Hope for Homeowners hotline. Is
yes.
that right?
Well, it's actually the Hope hotline. That's what it's actually referred to as. And yes, we are one of 9 agencies that answers this nationwide hotline. And it was an effort that joins nonprofit housing counselors with connects homeowners with nonprofit housing counseling agencies, so a consumer can figure out what options they have and to navigate through the foreclosure process.
So the Hope Hotline is something that unfortunately is getting muddled in the minds of consumers a little bit. Why is that? Tell us a little bit about what's going on out there.
My personal experience, I think the public's perception is that counseling is going to equate an outcome of being able to save their homes. And not in all cases. The reality is, unfortunately, there are circumstances or situations where the final outcome is, unfortunately, they might not be in that home.
Okay, and specifically, I've seen the word hope. And in fact, we even have a letter here, and unfortunately the audience won't be able to see it, but this is the HOPE right at the top of this letter, and it says Homeownership Protection Education Alliance, Inc.
That's right.
And this is an example of an organization that charges for renegotiation services that co-opted the use of the word HOPE.
Yes.
In their case, it's an acronym.
Yes.
So what has happened out there with Hope Hotline and some of those?
Unfortunately, there's quite a few of those agencies out there that they've picked up on this Hope Hotline, and because it's a nationwide effort, and they've picked up on it, and they've coined their names or created names that are very similar to ours, and that's to divert attention to their agencies, which is not the right attention that, at least from our perspective, that we'd want. So.
Okay, and you and I were talking a little bit about all of the people that have paid for renegotiation assistance, but recently they're prohibited from doing that. Tell us why.
That's right. Specifically here in California, the California Attorney General, Edmund G. Brown Jr., passed created an initiative that requires those that are going to charge fees for assistance, they're prohibited from doing that, mortgage assistance. And then on top of that, they're required to register with the Attorney General and secure a $100,000 bond. So that that curtails some of those organizations, but not all of them. But that does assist in agencies like ourselves.
Not all, because some people are willing to skirt the law or circumvent the law in order to get those upfront fees.
That's very true.
It's now illegal as of just January this year for a legitimate organization to ask for upfront fees for renegotiation assistance.
That's right, yes.
Okay, so the problem, though, that we have, besides the people that want to skirt the law, is there is a way around that. How can people still charge up front?
Well, I'll tell you, I met somebody not but 5 houses down from me who is a real estate agent or broker, and I asked him what he was doing given the climate, the industry here in Southern California. And he's like, I'm doing mortgage assistance. And I asked him, well, are you familiar with the directive under Attorney General Brown? And he says, yes, I am. But what I've done is I partner myself with a law firm. And therefore, I'm immune from this bill, and I can actually charge upfront fees, and under the premise it's a retainer fee.
Okay. And Chris, I'm going to go over to you.
Yes, sir.
John just mentioned that a lot of these firms are pairing with law firms. law firms can charge a retainer. Is that right? How prevalent is this that law firms now are offering really dubious services under the guise of legal assistance for renegotiation? And how could somebody parse out who the good attorneys are and who the not so good are?
That's probably the hardest part. What we're referring to when we're talking about is California Civil Code 2945, in which once a home is in foreclosure, defined as a notice of default recorded on the property, nobody's allowed to charge any money up front. And Jerry Brown, obviously, to his credit, has done a lot of great things, including the new Loan Lies program, etc. But there's much more that needs to be done. The vetting process is extremely difficult, and unfortunately for the people that are extremely honest, they're being caught up they're the smaller percentage. They're being caught up in all the people that are scam artists. So what has to happen, quite frankly, is we need to draw kind of just a baseline and say, if someone's going to charge you for something up front, it's probably not a good idea to do business with them.
That's right.
And so I do my very best, obviously, with all the people that write me and call me, is to refer them, quite frankly, oftentimes to Springboard and a very few select nonprofit HUD counselors. But I want to talk today, hopefully, about the different types of scams that are coming out and some things that, some new stuff and some new twists. And then there's going to be a new wave, if you will, of advertising talking about Title 12 or RESPA and Title 12, and I'll get into that later.
Actually, that's what I wanted to get into now, because once we open up the phone lines, I know we're going to get a lot of calls. We already have one. Barbara, I'm going to ask you to wait just a little bit. I want to hear about this RESPA scan. Chris, tell me about it.
It's what it's called, and this has been, Roger, what's happened is the following. It started in Florida, and it's really become prolific across the United States. It's not that it's a bad thing to do, but in the wrong hands, obviously, it's causing people who have already paid for a modification and it failed, who are desperate at this point in time. What's happening is that they're now falling prey to certain attorneys, and actually it's not even the attorneys, it's the people that they allow to go out and market on their behalf. And they will tell people, look, under RESPA Section 12, 2605, little letter E, you're entitled to ask the lender to proof the note. Well, look, I've read the section probably half a dozen times, and while that is 100% valid, the problem is that it has to be a qualified written request, and there needs to be a good reason for that. Now, that's...
Chris, explain proofing the loan. What does
proofing the loan means the following, is that loans are sold since 2000, for the most part, 2000 forward, loans were not held on to by the lender. It's no longer going down to your neighborhood bank, getting a loan, and making a payment to that neighborhood bank. And so in short, I could talk about this for a day and a half, but in short, loans have been sold over and over and over again. Fannie Mae's own numbers, Roger, show that a $100,000 note in 2007 could have had well over $1 million invested in its future value, its future earnings. So there's really no way oftentimes for a lender. In fact, CNN reported recently that upwards of 50% of the notes have been lost or destroyed. So based on that data, the scam artists are capitalizing on something that's been talked about in the media and saying, give me money, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and I'll see if I can't get your note set aside, and you'll owe nothing on your home.
And get to keep the home?
And get to keep the home. Now, maybe in a 0.5% that could happen, but those are pretty bad odds, and it's a very small window. My goal, my passion is to set the proper expectations for the public, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Well, let me ask you, you said a 0.5%, that sounds right to me, because nobody's just going to voluntarily set aside hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt obligation that you owe them. But on the other hand, you did mention that a lot of these notes now have been propagated and are lost. Isn't that a little like these people that fight their ticket by going into traffic court, hoping the police officer doesn't show up and they win by default?
Correct. And I don't want to hang, listen, we're still a capitalist society, okay? So I don't want to hang the banks on a technicality. However, here's the caveats to what I've just shared. If somebody legitimately, and there's legal aids out there, all within probably 2 or 3 blocks of the county seat of each individual county, there's legal aid societies that will help people. If you legitimately have been taken advantage of, I know that there are senior citizens out there on a Social Security income, and we're told that 1% option arm was a fixed rate loan. They have been duped, and many people have, and now they're being forced out of their home. In those situations, I do believe that somebody needs to get the lender to the negotiating table. And if you simply go through the regular process, you've got 5 million people in foreclosure or in default, serious delinquency, and actually the second quarter of 2009, modifications have gone down. Now, I think John and I were discussing, I think they may go up again here the third quarter, but the bottom line is the need for modifications is outstripping what's actually occurring. by such a large chasm, and it's only going to get worse. We've got to do something for these poor consumers, and RESPA, Section 12, Title 12, will actually be one way that the legitimate people can bring the lenders back to the negotiating table and force a modification where one is valid and warranted. So you
hold that thought. I'm going to take
Sorry.
a couple of calls. That's okay, Chris. Let's go out. Barbara, thanks for waiting. San Bernardino, what's your question, Barbara?
Barbara, I'd like to know whether there's any truth to the Chapter 13 law now being able to get a modification on an upside-down loan when the lender has refused the modification, and you go into a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Do they have to sit at the table with you and work out a modification on an upside-down loan?
Great question, Barbara. John, you want to take that?
Unfortunately, that's not the case. In a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, where there's no requirement or obligation for a lender to reduce the principal balance, if that's what I'm understanding the caller's question. However, I know there is some legislation or some proposed legislation sitting on the table, but as of yet, it's not realistic.
And that's what was commonly referred to as a cram down, is that right?
Yes, that's right. It was
giving bankruptcy judges the ability to force a reduction of the principal?
That's exactly right.
And that's just stalled.
Yep. It's non-existent for the time being.
So let's nuance this a little bit. Barbara's question was more broad. Is it required that the lender at least engage in good faith negotiations of some sort, like extending the loan term, a forbearance, or interest reduction, or is there no obligation whatsoever?
Well, the lender is going to do a due diligence in trying to explore all possible methods to accommodate a borrower's request if they've had some sort of change in income, and to help that borrower stay in the home. And part of it is, in part, looking at reducing the principal balance, but I can assure you that it's not as a widespread or common thing that we'd like to see done more often.
All right. Chris, did you want to elaborate on that?
Well, the only thing that could happen, a bankruptcy judge, at this point, the law only allows a bankruptcy judge to deal with a second home. And under SB 896 that did pass, they had a cram down legislation or a cram down provision in that, and the industry, the bank industry, was able to make sure it was taken out or extrapolated out of there. They are trying to bring it back again, basically the exact same statute, and part of that, I think, is that the industry made promises they did not keep. Under the Hope Now Alliance that all these servicing lenders signed covering 80% of loans being serviced, they're failing miserably at keeping their own written word.
So, Chris, what you're saying is this cram-down legislation that would reduce principal and help a lot of people, that was attempted for primary homes at the time that it existed for secondary homes.
Correct.
And they lost it for secondary homes, so we've gone backwards.
No, I apologize. No. We were trying to give that same protection you have on a second home to your primary residence, and the banking industry was able to get that out of the bill. But no, nothing. We didn't go backwards. We just didn't go forward.
Okay, so it still exists for second homes.
Correct.
All right. So, Chris, you were telling us a little bit a moment ago about the RESPA, the Title 12 scams.
Yes.
Now, we characterize it as a scam, but it's actually something that it's
part of the USC code. It is definitely allowed and needs to be done in many cases where somebody's rights have been violated and there was misrepresentations on the part of the originator, which we've now found out was widespread. I just don't want people paying for something, or at least there are good legitimate people in the private sector that may charge $1,000 to $2,000 because they've got to feed their families. But they need to go through the vetting process, and I wouldn't just deal with somebody who calls you on the phone or advertises. It better be somebody that's been referred to you by your attorney, by a CPA, by a nonprofit, somebody that you can trust, as opposed to just somebody who's done a mass marketing campaign. I'm doing my very best to make sure that people understand that this program is out there, but don't just fall prey again to a new scam artist that's doing mass marketing.
Okay. Because the nuance that you say, qualify them, only good for certain people, that's not what people are going to see in the commercials that get broadcast on television.
Come one, come all, just like modifications.
And yet, there's a chance that somebody may not get the response. In other words, if you're trying to improve your credit, one of the common ways when you pay a advertised on television service is they submit a argument against a delinquency notice on your credit, and if either the credit agency or more specifically the one that gave you the derogatory remark does not respond within, I think it's 45 days, then it gets removed automatically.
Temporarily. They could always refile. So that, yes, you're technically correct, but they have the right to then find that it was a factual, legitimate late, and they can put it back on your credit report on the next cycle.
Yes.
Okay, so by analogy, it seems to me that these people are cropping up, asking you to pay upfront retainer fees because they're in a law firm, they can do that, and they will then file a qualified claim under Title 12, the RESPA statute, and try to get your loan set aside, and they're giving you probabilities, they must be giving you probabilities, that make it sound like lots and lots of people are getting their home for free.
Well, I haven't seen a lot of the marketing yet. I was talking to a friend of mine, Terrell, on the way here. He actually is somebody who is a legitimate business person, and I was talking to him, and we were both, it's kind of black humor, laughing about the fact that it's very sad how much advertising is going to be coming out over the next 6 months on this particular topic. It's going to be, he's ahead of the curve, but and so is this topic, but you're going to see a lot more of this, Roger. It's going to be the same people that had a monopoly on the modifications are getting tired of the Attorney General and others now writing inquiries to them. So they're finding a way around that and saying, all right, the next big wave is going to be, let's sell people on this, and we're not modifying a note, we're not governed by the DRE, they're claiming, we're simply acting as a consultant to help you fill out the proper paperwork so you can send in the right RESPA request. And then once you are able to get your file, because under the title, you have a right to see what a lender is reporting about you and look at your entire file. Once the file has been received, if they can get it, then they'll refer to the attorney who will work for a reduced rate because he's got a flow of business coming in.
So, okay, let's talk a little bit about another situation that has come up quite frequently, renters. And I don't know if you can talk to this specifically, but I'm sure you can. And that is a single-family dwelling gets foreclosed. I have read that a quarter of the foreclosed homes have tenants in them. What happens to the tenant? And more specifically, when the notice of default gets taped onto the door of the home they're renting, should they skedaddle?
No.
No.
Do you want to cover that? Under the Senate Bill 896 that just was signed earlier this year, in there, under that umbrella, you have the Protecting Tenant at Foreclosure Act of 2009. And many people may have heard by now that now, if somebody is renting a home and the home is sold at a trustee sale and title is conveyed, meaning it's gone back to the bank or somebody else, you have to give that tenant 90 days to vacate. Now, there's some caveats. You have to understand this. If you signed a lease agreement for, say, 1 year, and that lease agreement was signed prior to the notice of default being recorded, the new owner of that property has to honor the lease agreement unless you're buying that property as your primary principal residence and you plan on moving in. Then you can go back to the 90 days. But the bank has to honor the lease agreement, even if it means the person is going to stay in the home for the next 9-10 months.
And a substantial number of the homes that are being bought, especially at auction, are by investors, absentee owners, isn't that?
That is correct.
So in that case, the tenant can stay in for the duration of the lease.
Correct.
Even if somebody buys it who wants to occupy, can they kick the person out in 3 days, notice to quit?
No, 90 days now.
90 days is the minimum.
Yes.
And that's federal law. The only thing that can happen, state law can only enhance the law. It can't take anything away. So federal law preempts state law unless state law gives additional protection.
I know there was a lot of confusion, and one of the reasons was a couple of years ago, the requirement was 30 days. Mm-hmm. And then in 2008, California legislation was passed that gave everybody, the tenants, 60 days. And then you're talking about federal legislation that came into effect in May that gives everybody 90 days that supersedes all the others.
Correct.
So I have seen people confused because they'll go to one site and it says 30, another says 60, another says 90. 90 is the minimum now.
That is correct. And that's the toughest thing about what's going on. What it used to be what I learned, I might be able to learn something today and it might last me for 6 months.
Yeah, that's right.
Today if I learn something, tomorrow it might be different. So I've always been a voracious reader. But now I have to spend no less than probably 2 to 3 hours every single day studying and staying up on through many different subscription sites, as well as going on to sites like Center for Responsible Lending. They're a great resource for the public as well.
All right, let's jump out to a caller. Rancho Mirage, Kenneth, it's your call. What's your question?
Yes, I was trying to find out what is being done about the entities that's within the mortgage companies that have been altering documentation and gaining title to our homes.
Okay, so his question here is, he has heard, I presume, that some mortgage companies are altering title to gain possession of the home. And there's a corollary I've heard, which is companies that are trying, and we group them generally as some of the fraud companies or scam companies, that they don't alter the title, but they have you deed over the home to them and lease it back. So first one, altering the title.
Well, and it comes down to what it's known in the slang term is equity stripping. I believe it's California Civil Code 1167. But I guess the point is that equity stripping is highly illegal. And so what I would tell people, the rest of the people that are watching, is never sign anything when you're in default and you're in struggling, unless you're going to sit down with a HUD-approved nonprofit counseling agency or a legal aid society within, usually, like I said, there's plenty of them within a couple of blocks of the county seat. Don't sign anything. There's people out there that want to help you, that are paid to help you. You don't have to pay for any of this stuff. So I would say don't sign anything. Don't give your personal information over the telephone. And as far as if somebody's had their documents they believe have been altered, that would be a prime example, obviously, is when you want to go get legal aid, and that would be an actual legitimate reason to apply the RESPA rules, which would cause the lender to proof the note and actually be able to demonstrate, hey, this is what you've signed, this is what you've agreed upon.
All right, let's take another call. Let's go out to, I'm going to say it's San Bernardino. Jeff, it's your call. What's your question?
Chris, I have a question for you. Let's say a bank has a loan and there's PMI on that loan. That loan goes into foreclosure. Does the bank not only get the money from the loan, but they also get to keep the house and kick the people out?
Well, depending on everybody's individual circumstances, but yes. PMI, private mortgage insurance, is required on any loan in America, a federal loan, where a borrower puts down 19.9% or less. The amount of coverage depends on how much money somebody put down. But most loans, once you put down 19.9% down on the home or less, the lender's going to get coverage for the first 25%. So that's one of the reasons why modifications aren't necessarily always working or short sales aren't being accepted, is because you have to figure out, does the servicer, who more than likely does not own the loan, do they have the legal right to negotiate, which most of the time they do, probably 90% of the time they do, but they also have to determine under the net present value test, gosh, am I better off actually going to foreclosure and getting a claim from PMI? That may actually be a better benefit to the ultimate investor, who's got their greatest interest is going to be in the shareholders of that bank, not necessarily the consumer.
So I have heard that PMI is actually one of the reasons that the banks are reluctant to engage in these modifications.
I think Chris explained that really well. Yeah.
You counsel people a lot, John. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about what are you doing for the average person. You can assume most people are upside down. Mm-hmm. If they bought any time, say, 2005 forward, they probably owe more than the home is worth. Mm-hmm. So a straight refinancing is not really viable. What's the first thing you turn to for them?
Well, we try to connect them with the lenders and the servicer and the investors, and in some cases the PMI company in those situations, to open up the communication and identify what is the hang-up here, what's the obstacles, and more importantly is what is the servicer and the investor potentially facing for a loss relative to what the borrower can afford. So we try to do as best as we possibly can to open up that communication and dialogue and figure out what we know what the obstacles are now, what options do we have or solutions that we have to meet both parties.
Is Springboard a company that's going to pick up the phone and dial the general 888 collections call center for the lender?
No, we're going to call our loss. We have special numbers that we're going to be able to call directly to the servicer's loss mitigation department, the right parties to talk to.
Okay, and also let me mention the modifications that are going through, and there are some that are successful.
That's right.
Are they not going through because of the Making Home Affordable program?
They're going through because making home affordable in large part is contributing to the success of modifications, and but there's other programs that are available out there. Non-GSEs also have their modification programs. So
Tell us what a GSE means.
GSE is a government-sponsored enterprise that's the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and they're investors of loans that are responsible for the securitization. When a homeowner comes in, gets a loan, eventually the bank needs more money, and they'll go to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and they'll package these loans and find investors to buy them, so the bank gets more money.
Okay, so if you have a GSE loan, you have an FHA-backed loan or a Fannie Mae-backed loan, you can qualify for the federal program called Making Home Affordable.
Well, FHA would be Ginnie Mae, but
Yeah, the Government National Mortgage Association, and I always joke now that there is no more government-sponsored enterprise. They're all owned by the government because they're no longer, they got taken over by
Yes,
FHA.
that's right. Yeah.
So, obviously they have failed miserably, sadly, and there's a lot of discussion on what could have been and what should have been. But I would say that the HAMP program, the Home Affordable Modification Plan, which was the updated version of the Make Home Affordable Modification and Refinance provision, came out on April 28th. About the only thing they've done that I've been super excited about is on August 4th, they released the name and shame, which you saw in all the newspapers where they started showing just how few modifications were going through by percentage of the people that are actually hurting. And we talked about this at the town hall meeting in San Bernardino at the library, and I do want to point this out again because I want the audience to know that we do, as Springboard and HELP, and I do compliment Springboard. I'm huge fans of what they've been able to accomplish, even for the people that come to me. But I do feel their pain, Roger. We talked about this. The fact of the matter is the servicers, all of them, which are listed, and they go to my site, and I'll actually, on my blog, I have them listed, they've all signed an agreement to abide by the HAMP program or their own suite of products. But when you call, the public, when they call and they are told, you don't need to pay, you can call, you can do this on your own, you call and you're told, it doesn't matter if you're in imminent danger by your own definition, you're not behind, we can't help you. Even though their own agreement says that they will. It also says you don't have to pay for a modification, yet you call in and I've got person after person after person who will say, Chris, they told me that I have to pay them $500 to $800 up front along with my modification request.
This isn't a third party. You're talking about
directly to the
themselves.
lender that signed the agreement that said you don't have to pay. And so what drives me crazy, and if I can just get one CEO to actually send out an email to his upper management, to middle management, to lower management to say, don't say that, it's not true, then I feel like I've been successful. But it's not fair to the public to have this expectation that they're going to be helped by the lender, and the lender says, never even heard of the HAMP program.
Okay, I want to jump out, take another call. We have several. Let's go to Mark in Upland. It's your call. What's your question, Mark?
Yeah, hi. I hope I get this straight for you. The local bank down here, I went down to get a sort of a refinance, whatever you call it, and my score, FACA score, whatever you call it, is 800, and I've never been late on a debt, and all my taxes are current, and they charge $750 up front. They did this last January, and 9 months have gone by, and I still don't have half of my money back, but they refused my loan because my mailbox was not in front of my house. I own two homes properties together. One is totally paid for and free and clear, and the other one's not. This is a strange question, I know, but my whole idea of this whole thing is it's just sort of become a scam, and I just understand how people can go in and pay the $750 with excellent credit.
Mark,
and get,
Mark, we want to ask you a couple questions here.
Yeah, Mark, I want to ask you a question. You said that, so you went down to your neighborhood lender. It wasn't just anybody, it was the lender that you had your loan with. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. The local bank, yes.
And so the local bank, do you mind telling me who the bank is?
It's Chase Bank now.
Okay, Chase. So you have a loan with Chase. You went down to Chase and you said you want to be able to refinance or basically lower your payments, correct?
Yes, it was going from 5.8% to 5.3%.
Okay, and so they charged you, and that's you're not falling under the category. I want to make sure the audience understands. You're not falling under the category of the HAMP program, the Making Home Affordable refinance provision.
No, I'm not. That's why I was a little worried about calling you on this. But
no, that's okay. But it's good because there's so much confusion. Your call is excellent because it allows the listeners to understand the subtleties and the difference. Because what I take for granted, I've found that the public is they're just clueless on this particular subject for good reason. They've never had to deal with it until now. But what I want to know is, so you did get some of your money back, but they have not. That you said that they did not offer you a refinance because you didn't receive your mail.
You would never believe it. Yeah, first of all, they said I own two properties side by side. I've been here 30 years, and my taxes I have to pay on my my mailing address, which is one of the homes. And they said because my taxes are paid on the wrong property, I can't get the loan on the other house. It just doesn't even make any sense. And then they said the mailbox is not on the other house. So, and it's just kind of a crazy thing. But the whole point is that everything's legit, and it's just really strange that I think all they're doing is taking money from people and keeping the $400 and giving you back $350 if they ever do give it back to you.
One last question. Mark, one last question. How did you get your loan from Chase in the first place? If they use this as a reason to deny your request for a lower payment...
I have never received an actual reason for denial yet.
All right, but how did you get... Mark, how did you get your loan in the first place? How long have you had this Chase loan?
Well, remember a long time ago they were giving loans... about 3 years ago, they were handing out loans, which was fine because I've always paid my loans. Never been a problem.
So now they actually wanted to qualify.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so...
But I do qualify on taxes, etc. I totally qualify.
Thanks, Mark.
If just tell Mark if he's hearing me just on the TV, make sure you get in touch with me. Go to my website and email me, and I'll make sure that you get taken care of. I do have some associates at Chase that I can at least make an attempt to assist you.
And go ahead and tell us your organization's website.
Oh, it's freehomeownershiphelp.org. freehomeownershiphelp.org. I couldn't find a longer name, so I had to settle for that one.
Okay, now keep in mind what we're going to do, and this is true of Springboard, which is credit.org.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, we're going to put the link to those. You go to kvcr.org, click Facing the Mortgage Crisis.
Can we also put the phone number?
Yeah.
800-947-3752.
And we really want you to plug yourselves in this particular case because people don't know who to trust. They don't know who to go to when they have a runaround such as that, and we know that you can help declutter some of it.
Yes.
Chris, do you think there was a possibility the bank couldn't determine which was his primary residence?
Correct, and that's why I believe it's, relatively speaking, it's probably going to be an easy fix.
Yep.
And you've probably run into the same thing. Sometimes it's just getting to the right individual who, there are people out there that literally, maybe they're just burnout themselves, maybe they've heard one too many sob stories, so they become so cynical that they push off where maybe they shouldn't. And so this gentleman, Mark, who called in, it sounds to me like a relatively easy fix if you just go and talk to the manager and say, here's what happened. Let's take you by the hand, go look at the property. Let's give this guy what he deserves.
I'm going to jump out to another caller. We're going to jump over to Victorville. Jackie, you're on the air. What's your question?
I wanted to know how would I seek assistance as far as obtaining my funds back after being scammed?
After a loan mod scam, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What can they do?
Oh, it's, you know what, it's gotten easier to a certain degree. If you can dialogue with us to Springboard or to the help program and you can let us know what took place, I will be happy to make sure that you get in touch with the Attorney General's office. They've got great lines of communication. They want to know about these people because it's not just you. There's other people that have been hurt. So if her, along with maybe 3 or 4 others from different areas of this region, complain, they take action, and they take action quickly. I got to give him credit. He has really made us a top priority. So I do believe that once you make the proper inquiry, there's often times where I've been very successful of getting in there and saying the right words to these people and saying, you don't want me as somebody, as your enemy, who's going to be focused on you for the next 2 to 3 weeks. And just based on some of that dialogue, I've gotten, so far, 100% of the people that have asked for money back, I've been able to get their money back. Now, it's not been a huge number.
That's a huge promise, Chris.
But it is a huge promise, but you know what? If nothing else, I want to know who these scam artists are, because the more we can highlight them, I'm not going to be able to bat 1,000 forever, Roger, but based on the requests that have come in, we've been successful because they don't want to be, they would rather refund a couple of checks and keep doing business, it's as a cost of doing business, than to have someone like myself highlight them to the Attorney General or to the person on our Board of Directors is the District Attorney for Riverside County, Rod Pacheco. They will take this stuff serious.
Okay. Let's go out to another call, Upland. And it's Annette. What's your question?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. This question may have been answered. I just turned in late. What is going on with the principal that the lender has on the loans? It's not being lowered or anything, even though they're modifying loans.
Yeah.
And the principals aren't being touched. For instance, my principal is $621. The home is valued at $445. Okay. I have a 9% interest rate. I'm trying to work with them on a forbearance. They're offering me $2,800 a month from a $5,000 payment, but not touching the principal. My thinking is, here I am 60 years old. I have a home that's 21 years old. It's never going to get its value back. I'm almost like renting if I take a 30-year again.
All right, so
the principal.
Yes, absolutely. We talked a little bit about the cram down not going through, but a lot of people are under the assumption that banks will reduce the principal that you owe, and what we're actually seeing in loan modifications is interest rate modifications or duration modifications. Talk a little bit about that, John.
Sure. In the Making Home Affordable Modification Program, HAMP, lenders actually start looking at, and restructuring the loan terms, are looking at the interest rate first. And then secondary, they're going to look at the amortization period, or the length of the loan. And they're looking at, maybe in the case of this caller, at the 9% rate, if they drop it down, say 2, 3, 5%, that might trigger a more affordable payment. Then they may look at it a step further and say, well, if we stretch out the loan term, maybe those two combinations will create a more affordable payment. And last but not least is the principal balance reduction, which,
you say last but not least, but it is least, isn't it?
It is least, you're right. And I do say last, actually. You're right, it is. It is the last step, is reducing the principal balance. And for the loans that have been modified so far, it looks like the rate and stretching out the term is what has been working for a lot of Americans. Although going into the principal balance creates another animal, which is financial loss to the investors. And then the lender has to look at net present value to determine what is that loss relative to what the affordability of the borrower. So,
right, and I understand. I'm going to generalize here. This is not the case in 100% of our modifications, but it seems that after they look at interest reduction, then they look at extending the duration of the loan. If those don't make it affordable enough, and the next logical step is to look at reducing the principal, they'll just go to foreclosure. Right now, there's a buyer's market in foreclosures. Is that the case? Or rather, there's a lot of those foreclosures that are getting sold. They can become more whole by going to a foreclosure than they can by reducing the principal.
They're working on false information. The industry, there's a lot of reasons why there's no reason to drop principal. One of the things that is no longer in effect is, historically, 30% of the people that, even once they're in default, will on their own bring the loan current. So if the industry looks at those numbers, they say, well, why would we offer principal reductions when we don't have to, because 30% of the people are going to come current? Just met with Governor Duke of the Federal Reserve Board, and she mentioned that number has actually gone down from 30% all the way down to about 7%. So the vast majority of the people are not going to bring their loans back current again. And it's a twofold problem. There's the moral dilemma versus the business decision. People made a promise to pay, and Americans over the last 100 years of our mortgages since the Great Depression, people have made their mortgage payment. They've made it on time, 98% of the time. This is unprecedented. So what happens now is you've got people that are so, like this young lady, she said, I'm 200,000 plus upside down. I'll never be right side up. And she's right, with the exception of maybe getting the tax credit. It's going to take a long time based on our current unemployment figures, nationwide approaching 10, here in the Empire 14% plus. By the time we get people back employed and get wages back up, it's going to be so far down in the future before those values come back that she'll never be back right side up. It may be another 15 years. Because here's what happened. We created such a false economy in the Inland Empire by creating all these buyers. You could be a waiter one day and be a homeowner the next by saying you're the regional manager of that restaurant, and you could get a loan. And we've got proof of these stories over and over again. So we created false buyers, created a false economy, and now we're suffering from it. And all the while, Wall Street, the lenders were securitizing this, and they knew better. They really did know better. I'm sure of it. And so you've got that problem. And then you've also got the fact that, quite frankly, we've been able to look at the contracts. They are making millions of dollars while homes are remaining in foreclosure. While a home is in foreclosure, a servicer is able to increase the amount of money they take in, obviously, for servicing that loan. And so in simple terms, what's the motivation for hurrying up the process when you can actually make more money from the ultimate investor by keeping somebody kind of on the hook? And then there's one other thing that's also occurring is that they have, what's the motivation also, Roger and John and audience? If you're being given tax dollars and you've got a safety net of the American public taxpayer, why should you go mark to market and actually take the loss today? If you do, you aren't going to be able to pass the stress test that you just got put through. So you might as well hold on to this false asset on your books as opposed to releasing it. And that's why you're going to see a lot more companies propping up. There's one in Texas that's become very prominent where they're going to the servicers and they're actually saying, let us manage these assets for you and put tenants in there, because if you sell them, you're going to be in serious trouble. You have to raise more capital in a market that's not conducive to that.
All right, I'm going to jump out.
Sorry.
Let's take. No, we have a lot of callers. We're going to jump out. Rancho Cucamonga. Chris, it's your call. What's your question?
Hi, this is perfect. My question is actually regarding what you were just talking about. I have heard, and I'd like you to tell me if this is true, that we are seeing such poor performance regarding the modifications because there are insurance policies for these investors. Should the house foreclose, they then will receive insurance money. Is that true? Because therefore, I mean, we can see why now they're not doing these modifications.
It's all the above. You've got PMI, you got private mortgage insurance that covers them. You've got the fact that they're, especially with ARMs, with adjustable rate mortgages, they're making a lot more money. I don't want to get too technical, but literally, just think of a quarter point versus 2 points. What would you rather have? Well, they make 2 points when a loan is in default in many of these contracts that they have with the investor. Or they only get a quarter point of the interest if it's performing. So there's millions of dollars being made. So if you're a servicer, you've got an opportunity to hurry up and negotiate something through Springboard and get a $1,000 incentive from the federal government, or you can make millions, keep doing what you're doing. It's a pretty easy decision at that point in time. So I hate to become such a cynic, but I've looked into this far too long for the last year, and the evidence is overwhelming. And so about the only thing that I can see happening for the future of homeowners is that we literally do, to a certain degree, we're going to have to bring the values down and start over. We need a do-over. We need a mulligan as a country to get out of the gate. The problem is that we're going to have higher unemployment, and especially here in the Inland Empire, we're going to have higher unemployment, and we're going to have more people when the option arms start to hit at the end of this year and beginning the next two. We're going to have more people, which is going to further put pressure on the investors and servicers.
Yeah, that's going to be another shoe to drop.
Yes.
All right, let's go out to Fontana. Robert, it's your call. What's your question?
Hi, my question is this. I'm about 140,000 underwater with the current house, and I'm looking at a short sale. Wanted to know overall what the consequences are and how badly my credit would be damaged by that.
Great
Good question, John.
In a short sale, there is damage to your credit, but there's debate on what is greater damage, the short sale, deed and foreclosure. In this particular form, I'm not going to debate that, but I can say that the expectation or the assumption is if you're looking at a short sale, it's likely that you may have defaulted before you start talking with your lender in that regard. The next issue is once the property has been resolved or disposition is the issue of deficiency. Deficiency. I'm sorry, deficiency. That's if the short sale price, that's what it is. The sales price is inadequate to pay off the proceeds of the loans. You'll be receiving a 1099 within that same year, and could cause a tax liability with Uncle Sam.
Okay, so this is something that is pretty hotly debated, and that's foreclosure short sale and the tax consequences. We talked about that a little bit. Chris, could you give us a synopsis of what phantom income is?
Yeah, phantom income, or what this, and in a short sale by definition is just that. You're selling the home short of what is owed on the property. So if someone owes $400,000 and the home market value is $200,000, there's a $200,000 loss. I would ask the people, I always tell people when I talk in live classes, write this information down because you're not going to get it, but I want you to write the information down and come back and blog us and ask us more detailed information. But people need to look up anti-deficiency protection in California. That's only for your primary principal residence for the same loan that you use to acquire your principal residence. Once you refinance, and especially if you take out a second or you pull out cash, that becomes a taxable event in the case where you don't pay off the loan in full. So back to that example, you owe $400,000, the home's value is $200,000, it sells for $200,000 in a short sale process. That $200,000 phantom income is a loss to the lender as well. They're going to issue a 1099-C for cancellation of debt, and if they mark box 4 of that 1099-C that says you're responsible, that the wrong time to open up that envelope is next April when you sit in front of your CPA. You need to address this now because on our website we talk about the IRS has a form called 982, and it requires you to fill out that form right prior to the taxable event occurring. So the gentleman who called in, he needs to know that he needs to go to the website. You can download the form right from my website, and he needs to address this now. In fact, there's great CPAs out there and tax attorneys. I would say for the audience, if you're struggling with your home, that's the first place you go. Because maybe a modification or a short sale is not in your best interest. Maybe a foreclosure could be in your best interest. voluntary being, but you still need to make sure that when you negotiate a deed in lieu of, it's just that. You're negotiating. You can ask for that to not be held responsible. The same thing with a deed in lieu, and the same thing with a voluntary foreclosure.
And short sale.
And short sale, sorry.
And that's why the lender has to approve a short sale. Part of the negotiation should be, if you short sale, that you won't have box 4 checked on your 1099-C saying you're responsible.
That is correct. And if they do market, remember, the onus is on you. The pressure's on you, because if they tell you verbally something, it doesn't mean that they're going to follow through, because a person on the phone negotiating is going to be different than the person who actually issues a 1099, a completely different department. So that's why it's important to document, document, document. Something else, I'm a huge fan of short selling. I always say try to modify if no avail short sale, but never walk away. It's not fair to your neighbors. So what I would tell you, and to your community as a whole, and we are all in this together. We're all Americans at the end of the day, and we've got a common enemy, and it is the financial firms that obviously help take us down this path. So I do want to see that the Americans stick together, and if they can short sale, please do so with the proper help of a professional, and get the tax advice first.
All right.
One thing, can I just add one thing?
Yep.
On a go-forward basis for credit purposes, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, in their sellers to servicer guidelines, as well as HUD, label foreclosure and short sale the same. What makes it the difference is what you can document. So the people need to take copious notes, and if they can, list their property prior to the home getting a notice of trustee sale and keep their documents. So that way when they do become a buyer, HUD says they'll loan you money 3 years after a short sale foreclosure, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac say 4 years. All's not lost. You just have to plan ahead and do this strategically.
All right, let's jump to some other calls. Let's go out to Billy in Apple Valley. It's your call. What's your question?
Hello. Yes, actually, I got caught up in this loan scam, and how do I put it? My husband was actually written off of our loan and put it into my name. Well, I'm on SSI, and my husband is drawing Social Security, and we're actually had a lot of fighting over this and separated and everything else. We've gone through a lot of trouble, but they said that they won't do my, what do you call it, my modification. I've called in, to the banks and tried to get it modified and do whatever I had to do. I've got a mediator that's supposed to be working on a lawyer type thing, because I was frauded. This man offered me a 2.75 interest fixed for 30 years.
Okay, and tell me, Billy, what's our question?
Well, what's our question is, can I sue these people?
Oh, can you sue them? That's
challenging.
I have heard that before. Let's talk about that.
Well, and that's exactly, now,
short answer though.
I will. That's what this, for a legitimate person like this who was misrepresented, the person who put her into this loan knew darn well if they did a stated income loan, obviously, the person never qualified, and this is a situation where, quite frankly, makes me mad, because this poor woman is going to find herself displaced. They're not going to do a modification in all likelihood, because both parties, even though they took him off the title, I understand, or maybe they took him off of the original note and put her on this new note, maybe because of credit purposes, they're going to have a difficult time getting even a quality company like Springboard to be able to assist them through this process. This is where sometimes I would say that a legal aid service needs to get involved and help this poor woman.
Yep. Right. And this is a case where I can see, and I know people that have done this, somebody advises one party in a marriage or a living arrangement to quit claim the house.
Right. And that doesn't need, you have to understand, just because you're off title doesn't remove you from the responsibility of the promise to pay. When you sign that promissory note, you agree to pay that loan back. All
right. I'm going to jump out. We're going to ask for short answers. We have lots of callers. I want to get to everybody. John, you're first up from Marengo Valley. What's your question?
I'm talking for people that are not in foreclosures, or for everybody. As far as I'm concerned, our houses are half the equity now, or the value, and we're paying taxes on the highest rate. What's up with that?
Good question. Property taxes.
Good question. That's well, what the homeowner can do is contact their property tax agency and request a reassessment. In California, a lot of the property tax agencies have got a tremendous workload looking at cases and reassessing property values because of declining values.
when Prop 13 passed in '78, they didn't predict, obviously, or they didn't think about what happens when values go down. So Proposition 8 followed up 2 years later, and under Proposition 8 of California, you are allowed to have your home assessed at the current market value, and there's a process. So if you're in Riverside or San Bernardino County, this process can be done online. And
it's free.
It's free. Never pay for it. In fact, I know the Larry Ward, the assessor, who was on with you and I not too long ago, they actually went all the way back to 2003 and reassessed 350,000 homes voluntarily, which by definition took out $25 billion of the tax rolls.
Last thing I want to mention is if somebody disputes the amount of their new assessment, because it's usually automatic that they get the new assessment, if they dispute it, there is an appeals process.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's jump out to, how about Fontana? Benjamin, it's your call. What's your question?
Yes, I wanted to know regarding the streamlining process. How does that work?
For an FHA?
Yes.
For an FHA. Oh,
for FHA.
For an FHA streamline, that is probably the greatest thing. FHA, I've always said in my last report, I've always been a fan, but now I'm fanatical. They have done such a wonderful job. They have literally saved this country's mortgage crisis from being worse than what it probably was going to be. But a streamline is this. It's a no qualifying, no cost, no appraisal way, as long as you've been able to prove that the last 12 months you've made your last 12 payments on time, and in fact they even allow for one 30-day late, you're automatically going to be able to get a lower payment.
Okay.
It's that simple. It's probably the simplest thing since sliced bread. Give me a call or write me, and I'll be able to explain in detail so that way when they do talk to a lender, they'll be able to know what to ask.
All right. Let's jump out to San Bernardino. Jeff, it's your call. What's your question?
Hey, first I wanted to thank both Chris and John for what you guys are doing. I commend you guys for what you're doing, and thank you. And second, what can the people do to help prevent something like this housing scam happening again? I mean, I really see the lenders and the banks trying to take advantage of a lot of people. Can the public do anything to help, clean this mess up?
Good question. Absolutely, yeah. Education and being aware of all what options you have. Our agency will meet with homeowners and provide free education and classes on the home buying process. We will even meet with potential homeowners or borrowers and review their loan documents, make sure that everything's in order.
And what about big picture bubble prevention? Because when these bubbles collapse, be it tech bubble in 2001 or the housing bubble in late 2007, there's always some degree of greed-based fraud that occurred to create the bubble, and then ultimately the consumers pay.
Because I probably only have seconds, I would love to talk about this for hours, but in seconds I would tell you the best thing to do is follow the money. If you will actually vote for elected leaders, your congressmen and your senators, because that's who has to make the change. If you'll vote for somebody who is actually is willing to put in cram down legislation, is willing to deny campaign donations from these financial firms, that's going to be about the only way to change this. The financial firms have a hold on America, bottom line. And so I could drone on about issues that would curl the toes of you and your audience members of what they're doing under the federal charter law versus what the state can pass a law and say, you're not allowed to do this, and they thumb their nose at the state law and say, we're under federal charter. So until our congressmen and senators in our state are willing to stand up for us instead of the financial firms, it's not going to change.
Okay, and let's go quickly to Palm Desert. Leonard, what's your question?
Gentlemen, I wonder if I could ask you a non-technical question. I'm about to lose my home in foreclosure, and I can't fight against it. I don't have the income. But could you tell me what stories you know or advice you could give for what to do with a full house of furniture when you have to move from a 3-bedroom house, say, to a room somewhere? Some of the furniture is very good. I don't want to just throw it away.
Leonard, I have to cut you off. I'm sorry. We only have a little bit of time. What can you advise?
Work with friends, neighbors to try to create a garage sale. My understanding, he wants to sell a house full of property. He realizes that he can't hold on to the property. Seek assistance from neighbors, friends, and hold a garage sale. There's even public websites that you can go to, like Craigslist, and actually post free ads
and also there's in the Inland Empire you have 211. I would tell him to please dial 211.
That's right.
And that is a great resource for the different public agencies that may be able to help him. They will if everybody calls in and says remembers 211, this is my problem. They will help guide you to the proper public agents that may be able to offer assistance, even if it's just aligning you with a church that might be able to go there and help.
Okay, and I know we have other callers. I'm sorry we're not going to be able to get to them. Closing thought, it's a tough situation on the garage sale because I know that you're going to get pennies on the dollar for everything that you acquired over time. That's a tough situation.
Yes,
I've been
it is.
there.
Yeah.
All right. I'd like to thank our guests, Mike and Chris, John and Chris, for being here this evening.
Like, where's Mike?
And thank you to our viewers for watching, and thank you very much to our callers for calling and sharing your situation with us so that we can hopefully help you. If you'd like more information about tonight's show or about foreclosure prevention, go to kvcr.org, click on the Facing the Mortgage Crisis, and that'll get you to a site with a plethora of information. We're going to put your information on there as well so they'll know how to follow up. Please join us next week for another show, foreclosure prevention related. I'm Roger Bowman, and remember, it's your call.
For more information about this project and related topics, visit kvcr.org and click on Facing the Mortgage Crisis.